Hello students and welcome to another lecture. This one will be on color. In many ways, color is the crux of art, whether it comes to painting and using pigments and color mixing, whether it comes to painting sculptures or the color of a sculpture, installations. In contemporary art, it's used a lot in the form of lighting, gradients, all kinds of different ways that color can be used. Psychologically, color is ingrained into us and it affects our emotions and our behaviors, how we perceive an object. There's also cultural and societal expectations for color. Red has connections to Christmas, black has connections to death, white has connections to purity. So there's many different ways that color is ingrained into us based on the part of the world that you come from and the culture that you have been indoctrinated with. We'll look at the artist James Turrell, a popular artist for creating light environments, and we'll look at Mark Rothko and some of the color field abstract expressionists and artists that just purely use fields of color to create a viewing experience. So please enjoy this lecture on color. Thank you.
It's a picture of Jim Carrey making a painting. So color is a collaboration of the mind and the world. That's what Paul Cézanne said. The reason why he said that is because color does not exist in reality. Color is an invention of our mind. Our mind has created color from the perceived light in order for us to tell what is what in the world. So color is an element of art. We're not going to cover any principles today. So color is the property of light and not the object itself. So color is not, when you have a red notebook, your notebook is not really red. It's because the light hits it and interacts with the molecules in it that it puts off this red. Colors look different in different lights. There is no true local color. So a red notebook or a red apple is not really red. If you put it under water, it may be a different color. If you have it at night, it may be more purpley than red or maybe more blue. So it's only red. It may be in the height of daylight. It's the true red that you may think it is, but there's no such thing as a true color of an object. It's just whatever the circumstances are of the object at the time. Isaac Newton, light in a prism. So Isaac Newton broke white light into familiar rainbow hues. So Isaac Newton shot light through a crystal prism here. And when he shot light through that, it refracted the light into all the different types of colors. You can see the visible color spectrum. Isaac Newton did a lot of color experiments. He also jammed a metal rod into his eyeball, thinking he could affect the way he saw. When we're talking about the way that an object appears, what color it appears, this is the way that it works. Blue objects absorb all the wavelengths except blue ones, and these are reflected to our eyes. So like in number A here, it's this red surface, this plane, it's absorbing the green, it's absorbing the blue, but it's reflecting off the red. Same thing here. And this is because of the pigment in it. The red goes here, the blue gets absorbed, the green reflects off. So paint is made from pigment. So you'll find objects that have this type of color in reality, and then you grind that up into a powder that you then manufacture into a pigment. And then when you paint something that color, you will get this effect. Black objects absorb all the wavelengths. So everything's getting absorbed into black and it's not letting anything out. So that's why it appears black. And then white just bounces them all back off. So you don't see any colors. Here's Van Gogh using all different colors here, juxtaposing greens and yellows, creating a sense of depth. Van Gogh is known for his color work. He did not want to paint what was really there color-wise, but he wanted to paint what he felt emotionally. So this probably felt a lot more bright to him than it really was. So he was jamming his psychological excitement of what he was seeing into the pigment, opposed to trying to make it realistic. This was also the case with Andre Derain, who painted this one. Again, these are not true colors to reality, but emotional representations of colors. He wanted to paint what he felt color-wise, opposed to what was really there. And then on the opposite end of that spectrum would be John Singer Sargent, who wanted to paint the colors as close to the way they looked in reality as he could. And a lot of times colors are very desaturated. Colors are grays and muted colors in reality, opposed to being highly saturated. So John Singer Sargent painted portraits very realistically like that. And he was quoted as saying that the painting is painted on your palette. So people who would watch him paint would see him mix all different colors over a long period of time on his palette before he ever touched a brush to the canvas. He wanted every color mix that he would need. Anders Zorn also painted very realistically and wanted to create that sense of depth and realism and chiaroscuro. And Zorn actually, they say, only painted with 4 colors. The 4 colors were red, yellow ochre, black, and white. So from those colors and mixing them all, these are all those 4 colors mixed. The white is in the middle, the black's at the edges, and then the red, the yellow, and the black here, all mixed together, create this big spectrum of colors. And if you use them subtly and precisely, you can actually get very realistic depictions from just those 4 colors. Picasso painted the blue nude in 1902. Picasso, again, he had a close friend that committed suicide, and he went through what they call the blue period, where he painted everything during that period in blue monochrome tones. So they would all be basically blue mixed with maybe black or white, and everything would sort of have this blue tone to it. It's been read as a psychological representation of sadness. Here's some more of his blue paintings. There's the old man with the guitar and a woman who's blind in one eye. Here in Adrian Kondratowicz's Trash Maximalism, he takes the regular black trash bag and replaced it in Harlem, New York City, with a polka-dotted insect repellent and biodegradable trash bag. So he shook it up. We're used to seeing trash as black, kind of black trash bags try to sort of hide it from the eye, hide it psychologically, pretend that it's not even there. But then when you see trash in a big polka-dotted pink bag, it's pretty hard to ignore. It catches your attention. You're wondering what it is, why it's there like that. So just shake up the everyday just by changing the color of an object. So color attracts attention and excites emotion. Perceptions are personal and subjective. So we all have our own connections to color. This tray in the form of a plum blossom with birds and flowers, China, late Southern Song Dynasty, 1200 to 1297, is carved from red lacquer on a wood core. Oftentimes red in the Chinese culture is a symbol of joy and good fortune, whereas red may be anger or passion in Western culture. So colors will, the meanings of them will change based on where you are from in the world. Color can be additive or subtractive, or additive versus subtractive. So additive color is color from light, and that combines and forms new visual sensations. So when you take colors, if you have a green light and a red light and a blue light, and you shine them together, then you can mix colors that way. But if you shine them all together, they will mix into the form of white. So in the additive process, which is used for a lighting designer, a photographer, or interior designer, or a filmmaker, white will be your center. In the subtractive system, the pigments combine and subtract from each other. So pigment absorbs or subtracts all colors except that which is reflected to our eye. So if you take all the colors in, and you may have done this in a painting class in high school or when you were younger, if you just take all the colors and you smush them all together and you mix them up, you just get sort of a dark brown because they cancel each other out. So opposed to the additive system where you get white by mixing all the colors, and the subtractive system with pigments, you get a dark brownish black. Nerve signals are reprocessed and interpreted as color in our brain. In paint, mixtures are weaker than the parent colors. They act as filters to the spectrum. So if you have a bright saturated yellow and you mix it with green, the color that combines the two is going to end up being weaker than the yellow by itself. So each time you mix a color, you dull the saturation of it. Color is the product of light. Grass is gray at dawn, yellow green at noon, and blue black at midnight. But the mind insists that grass is green. So we call that the color constancy effect. We always think that things are a color even though they change all the time. The color of things is constantly changing with the light. So this is 3 paintings by Monet. Monet was obsessed with painting these haystacks. He painted them over and over. He's an impressionist. So he was working in the late 1800s. And his whole philosophy was that color always changes. The color of the world will always be different based on the time of day or the season or whatever. So he would just paint the same things over and over in different lights and try to paint them outdoors, quick, fast, capture the light as quick as he can, and just study how the light would interact in different weather, different times of day. Our perception of colors is based on their surroundings. Color appears different based on the colors adjacent to us. So, right, these are the 2 same colors in the middle, but they look very different on different backgrounds. And here's another example of it. Here, colors are almost seen in conjunction with other. We never see colors in a vacuum. We almost always see colors next to other colors, unless you're in some kind of a strange, sterile space where everything's white. Even there, you'll get some kind of shadows or something. But this is a good example because this circle is the same color in both of these objects or both of these pictures. So it's just a variation of the stripes that are in there that changes the color of it. I'm going to put a link to this, how you see this on your module for the week. But this, believe it or not, is the same color. Okay. Color interaction refers to the way colors influence one another. We don't see colors in isolation. Simultaneous contrast, apparent change in color when it is paired with another color. So you put a white background with a green top, then it just sort of floats, interacts with each other, versus maybe something like this, where you get a kind of sinking in and a vibration between it. This one, they almost vanish into each other. This one appears to be on top of the blue. This one has a pretty stark contrast. So even though this is always the same color, we get a lot different effect based on which one it's next to. And the ones that vibrate the most are complementary. So those are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel, like red and green, purple and yellow, blue and orange. Red, orange, and blue-green vibration. So we get these sort of vibrations with certain color combinations. In the human eye, 2 types of cells are known as rods and cones are arranged in layers on the retina. They are photoreceptors. Rods, light and dark. Cones, distinguish hues. Opponent theory. So cones can register only one color in a complementary pair at a time. Constantly shifting between opposing colors creates a visual overload at the edge of the shapes, resulting in electric glow. So this is a painting by Pat Steer, large abstract, putting these 2 colors across from each other that are across from each other on the color wheel. Sort of it's more of a red and blue, but kind of has a warm red, so it has some orange in it. Your eye can only process one at a time, and it's constantly trying to make sense of the blue and the red, and going back and forth then creates a vibration between the 2. Same thing is utilized here with Maynard Dixon's landscape painting, putting this vibrating orange and blue in the shadows. The 3 main things to know about how to identify a color. Color has a hue. That's the color on the spectrum, so red, blue, green, purple, yellow, whatever. The chroma, that is how intense the color is. So a color that's undiluted at all will be out here on the edge, whereas a color that is highly diluted by black or white will come in here. Or the other thing you can do is add the colors opposite to dull it. So chroma is how muted or dull a color is versus how intense it is. And then value. So value is how light or dark a color is. Some colors have a natural value, like yellow is naturally a light color, but blue is naturally a dark color. So the value part of it goes on the vertical axis here. The more white you add to it, the lighter it'll be, or the more yellow you add to a color, the lighter it'll be. The more black or blue you add to a color, the darker it'll be. So value is the lightness or darkness. In a painting, this is done by shading with black or tinting with white. With the hue, pink, rose, scarlet, maroon, crimson, all colors, but in each case, the hue is red. So even though you have all these other colors that are different forms of red, red is the parent color that they all fit on underneath. Much of that was done for commercial reasons so that they could make market crayons and whatnot. And this system this is the Munsell color system. So Munsell is this man here. USDA adopted this for soil research to find the color of soils, but he invented this system of light and dark, saturated versus desaturated chroma, and then hue, red, yellow, purple, blue, green going around. So hue, here's the three: value, hue, chroma. That's invented by Munsell. There's another version of it right there. Color wheel. So there are many different color wheels outside of the Munsell one, but most color wheels, they break it into three primaries: red, yellow, and blue. And you can theoretically mix every color from those colors. Of course, it's very difficult in reality. You may have to have more like 5 or 6 to mix every color. But secondary colors are mixes of two primaries. You have orange, green, and violet, and then a tertiary primaries, and an adjacent secondary. So that is like blue, green, red, and violet make red, violet, and so on. So you got your primaries, your secondaries, and then your tertiaries are the ones in between. Cyan, yellow, and magenta are the colors used for printers because they can make pretty much everything. Blue, green, and red are the primaries for light. The color wheel is a good starting point, but can sometimes lead to unsatisfactory results. So as you see, there's many different color wheels. Warm and cool colors. Colors don't really have a temperature, but we still associate them with a temperature. You can have a blue flame. You don't necessarily, something that's blue is not necessarily hot. Something that's yellow or red is not necessarily warm. Psychologically, though, they do have a function. The Earth's atmosphere disperses the shorter wavelengths of blue, coloring the sky and objects that we see in the distance. So we talked about this with our last lecture on atmospheric perspective. Value and color are more pronounced in the foreground and subtler in the distance. Things get more muted, more vague, less detailed as they move in the distance. Things become more bluer and pale as they move in the distance, and more saturated as they're closer together, again, like this and this. It's also utilized in abstraction. We have a sense that this part is further away. Maybe the black is closest to us. And so different color interactions just in abstraction can move around our eyes. Here we have Alan Cote, who's creating sort of a vibration between the orange and the blue here. Georgia O'Keeffe, another color abstraction, nice big solid blue here. More pale colors kind of mess with our sense of space a little bit. Philippe Mondrian in composition 2, as I said in a couple of lectures ago, he uses just the three primaries: red, yellow, blue, and white and black, and then uses geometric lines to create composition. So to him, he reduced painting to just color and composition. He thought that could do everything he needed to do, everything he wanted to say. Henry Matisse did this of Icarus from Jazz, 1943 through 47. It's a series that he did of cutouts, cut papers, where this is Icarus. So Icarus, if you know the story of Icarus, he is in ancient Greek times, his father makes him wax wings so that he can fly, but he flies too close to the sun and his wings melt and he falls to earth. And here we have a brilliant use of color contrast where the black and the red of his heart, his wounded heart as he falls from the stars. Barrett Newman, who had made this massive piece, Ver Heroicus Subliminis, which is the heroes of the sublime man. Barrett Newman uses saturated red to really excite us emotionally. The color red can actually raise your heartbeat if it is bright enough and you stare at it closely enough. So in this one, it's a massive big canvas, and he wanted you to stand as close as possible so you would be immersed in the red. He puts these subtle lines, which he calls zips, these or vertical lines, which he calls zips, kind of create this sense of breaking up the canvas a little bit, almost that there's a different light on it in parts. So he wanted to talk directly to our emotions, which is what the color field painters want to do. We'll look at more Rothko later on. He's another color field painter. They want to appeal directly to our emotions. And they feel that connects to the sublime, which is fear and awe. In this piece by Kanakwe, who is a Ghanaian sculptor, in this culture, these are actually made as coffins. So this is a cocoa pod in the shape of a coffin. This is a giant corn stalk, and this is a pineapple. So he makes these everyday objects in the forms of coffin, and they're brightly colored to exaggerate the mood. But what he does is he picks something that the person was involved in their life. So maybe a dentist would be buried in a giant tooth, or a farmer might be buried in corn. So they commissioned these coffins from him, and it's a whole other take on death, right? We always think about death as very serious, very somber. There's darkness to the coffin. They're usually a dark wood, or it's not a bright celebration as much in Western culture, but in Ghanaian tradition, it is another way to look at it. So there's a video to watch on him and his workshop, and he has since passed. but his descendants are continuing the workshop on. In pigment, which is where you use subtractive, so that's where the colors cancel each other out to create a darker colors or weaker colors. Pigments and dyes are each very chemically different. So burnt sienna and burnt umber will dry fastest in oil paint, whereas other colors will dry slow, sometimes take even weeks to dry. Cadmium and earth colors are generally considered opaque. So these are different versions of opacity. Opaque means that almost nothing underneath of it will show through. Translucent means some of it will show through, and transparent means almost all of it will show through. So every oil color has opacity, a rating of opacity, whether it's transparent or opaque. Quinquerotone red and thylacine blue are transparent and intense. So even though those colors are transparent, they're very bright and saturated. Color overtones, as David Hornum defines, an overtone is a secondary hue bias in a primary color. So Algerian crimson is a red with violet overtones, and scarlet is a red with overtones. And then achromatic is black and white, no hue. So if you say something's achromatic, it means it has no color in it. There's a couple of things on transparency, translucency, and opacity. All light must travel through. So psychologically, again, Van Gogh create this jarring contrast between the red and the greens, the sense of brightness, but also there's a mutedness to it where maybe it seems seedy or downtrodden. So he's using a contrasting colors. It's a strategy when mixing colors to create emphasis. Right? You have the green and the red really create a bright contrast. Then here in Mary Cassatt's The Boating Party, analogous color scheme. An analogous color scheme is when you use colors that are all next to each other on the color wheel. So an analogous color scheme would be yellow, orange, and red, or it would be yellow, green, and blue, or violet, red, and orange. So it's all colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So this one is got green and yellow, and so a little green and a little yellow, and all different forms of green and yellow to create that kind of analogous and harmonious color scheme. Pointillism is when you put little dots next to each other to create the contrast. So in George Seurat's The Circus, 1890-1891, he is, instead of actually mixing the colors, he's optically mixing them by just putting the two colors right next to each other, and then they vibrate when you pull back. So here we go there. So they're not actually mixed, but just placed next to each other to create the sense of mixture. Dan Flavin is a sculptor that uses color. Most of his sculptures involve fluorescent lighting, changing the color of different rooms, very atmospheric. There's another one, Dan Flavin, contemporary sculptor. So Mark Rothko, who's a color field painter, he just pretty much almost his entire career just painted these very simple squares and shapes on canvases. And I have a video. You may think that Mark Rothko, a lot of people don't really consider it to be art, or they think it'd be too simple, which is not really the point. But what he's getting at is just the psychological reaction you have to the color and creating a sense of depth that pulls you into the painting. So there's a video to watch on him. It's called The Case for Rothko. And then finally, in this lecture, we have James Terrell, who is actually local here. He has a big project going on at the Rodin Crater, which is just northeast of us. And he uses space and color to affect our sense of perception. A lot of it is based off of stained glass windows, the kind of spaces that are created by stained glass windows. He also wants to create a type of space like that. A lot of times there'll be a sky hole that lets in light and interacts with the room. And depending on what time of day it is, the colors in the room will change. And you get a sense of the way that our psychological perception of reality changes based on the time of day and the lighting that we get. So artists use color in many, many different ways. It's a very important part of art.
That'll be all on the lecture today for color. I hope you enjoyed and start to see color in a different way in your own life. So thank you for listening. Bye.